Hey everyone, Richtano, you know who it is, reporting from the gay old town of Amsterdam, where I'm on holiday doing this week, which means I have less resources for my regular furrow segment. As you can see, the glasses are missing, I'm wearing my post-sightseeing PJs, and the camera is standing on top of a box of biscuits. Not that this kind of raw, barely edited review wouldn't be appropriate for the subject at hand, namely the Stooges fun house. Still, not something expected to be as detailed and well rehearsed as usual, though I'd rather say you should expect anyway about 7 or 8 minutes of me scrambling to find anything of significance to tell you, since pretty much like a lot of other bands and albums throughout the series, I've never been acquainted with the Stooges until now. I've never cared to. It might be a little more surprising with them, since 70s music was the first non-classical period I immersed myself in, although not really. Compared to the bulk of prog and electronic, the heavy rock side was always hit and miss for me, an area of shallow introspection. I dug a lot of Led Zepp, but gave up on Deep Purple after their early series of albums. I never touched Sabbath, and the Stones sounded flat out boring to me. And the Stooges, well, I just ignored them. I really did. I should also mention Iggy Pop's whole physical display for me usually grossed me out a bit, especially the older he got. Fortunately, finally getting to check the Stooges 70s material elicited no, I knew I didn't miss much reaction from me. Iggy early on proved to be an interesting vocalist after all, and all their 3 albums from that period evolved in a way that doesn't just boil down to raw musical histrionics and can instead be examined with some depth. Even judging simply by the cover, you have the debut, which seems clearly inspired from those 60s Brit and US rock profile covers. Funhouse's wild, colored visuals seem like they could fit a sort of symphonic progressive rock, except of course they don't. And only Raw Power comes giving off that bare, highly masculine, savage aura. Really though, at least until reaching Raw Power in my perusal, there was nothing that sounded well outside my comfort zone, or which I'd take serious issues with. There's no doubt that edgy ingredient that's credited as inspiring to the whole punk and garage rock movement, but I also heard stuff coming from rock and roll, psych and heavy rock, stuff already happening at that turn of the decade, something that can be assimilated and enrichen the listening experience of the Stooges music before focusing on anything truly counter-revolutionary. The debut for me resembled that kind of first work one would also hear from bands such as Rush or Led Zeppelin, which I personally tend to appreciate more than the majority, mainly for some tidbits of surprising musicality and good early music, regardless if it's meant to pale in comparison with the future works that are either seminal and groundbreaking or just definitive for those bands in their unique flavor. For instance, compared to at least half of the rest of the Stooges song, I was simply bewitched on the spot by the song We Will Fall, that's off the Stooges debut. At the opposite pole, I won't go right now into much detail regarding Raw Power, although yeah, it was for sure the bumpiest ride out of their triptych. So bumpy, in fact, it felt like bumping my head against something in an endless loop. Funhouse, by comparison, seems to be the middle-of-the-road experience in terms of its aesthetics and how much you can delve into it. Sure, it already sets itself apart from the debut as well as the majority of rock tendencies at that time, going for relentless, uncompromising, musically filthy, seemingly chaotic and blood-pumping music, whereas other bands like Zeppelin or Deep Purple still entertain the thought of their records having a smooth concept and flow of songs, ranging from wild rocking to ballads and such. You can sense the Stooges doing away with much of these customs. However, I don't find it the case that it's all entirely structureless or genreless, so to speak. Influences still abound on this album. In fact, I think they kind of still do on Raw Power as well, even if it sounds more like a total deconstruction of either rock and roll, blues or hard rock tropes. On Fun Power, glimpses of typical song refrains or clear-cut segments still surface, for instance TVI having a clear ABA structure, or there being faint ideas of refrains and contrasts on both Down on the Street and Loose. You have Dirt as an arguable deceleration within the overall hounding pace of the album, and such examples can still pop up further. My point being that the overall impression of the music is clearly hard-hitting and such, but that paying attention to what's being played and to its subtleties can reveal layer upon layer of musical expressions, something that's no doubt laudable. For its brief 40-minute run, Funhouse does send a shock to the system, though I'll state again, its more pleasant aspect for me was when I could still pick up on a few peculiar things or sensations. Down on the Street sets the groove right away, marking perhaps the best immediate impression of what the band is going for in terms of obstinate unleash, but as I've said, it's not entirely refrainless and aimless either. Same goes with Loose, which is overall as blunt and heavy as the title suggests, plus with a main riff that sounds literally a note or so away from Deep Purple's Smoke Underwater, which is kind of weird, still with some sensible moments, particularly from Iggy during his refrains. TVI then turns the crazy dial full max with more clogged, fuzzy instrumentation, the guitar riffing being drowned way below together with the bass, the vocals adding to the pulse with some rhythmicity of their own, sounding angry but also sensual and a bit stoned. Midway, this loose recitation going completely wild, replacing basically what would be a guitar improvisation with just vocal demonic psych-inducing breakdowns. Dirt and 1970 are both a bit groovier, more impulsive tracks, plus making me wonder if I'm hallucinating or not in hearing a heavy Dorsian gene to the singing and to the overall atmosphere. Iggy's vocals kind of shed any real gracefulness by the time 1970 plays out, plus you get that surprising introduction of saxophone spits, which you normally find no real niche in this blood-stained, skinny set of rock instrumentation, yet it totally delivers and makes for an exhilarating amping up of the whole album's fervor. Funhouse then stays in the same sexy atmosphere, perhaps making an even smoother fusion of jazz and rock. On the other hand, all the other elements bring to mind previous songs, which doesn't make this one itself quite that original, gripping and anthemic. Placed anytime sooner on the playlist, I think it might have made its hit, but such as it is late during this whole cavalcade, it feels a bit like going for seconds. Finally, LA Blues feels like the band just nukes the whole thing. There is finally no more song structure to truly speak of, unless you count some of it as pure improvisation coming from the side of the sax, or pure noise coming from the guitars and the bass. Iggy's chanting is once again demonic and unhinged, making for some fitting final fireworks for the album, basically. So all in all, I found this to be an exciting, ferocious even listening experience, though again, I think the album as a whole can signal to you more than just a pre-punk surreal escapism from any grasp of musical form and acoustic or stylistic decency. I pretty much enjoyed the debut, and this one, even if that led me in a bit of a struggle with Raw Power, at least for now. But you know, Funhouse should overall suffice if you want to get that surge of howling, hardcore playing of theirs, but still feel anchored in that heavy rock period in which all the giants were manifesting themselves. Not sure if I'm ready to call this one a classic yet, and as far as earworm songs go, I think only TVI really stuck with me after repeated listens. Nevertheless, I also seriously didn't have any major grabs with this album. I wish I could have summed up deeper impressions than this about it, but that's how things stand, at least for now. I'm feeling a light decent 7 on this, and I'll catch you in the next video. Okay? Richtoniwik Tenno, The Stooges, Fun House, never ever.